All right. This is where a lot of people start. To me, that looks kind of dead, right? And we could do that, we could repeat that with any of the earth tones. But what I think is actually more successful is to start by mixing complements, right? So remember, your complementary pairs are one primary color and the secondary color that it has nothing to do with. So I'm going to start by mixing red and green. The palette I'm using, by the way, is more or less the entire palette that you guys have. I've got my limited primary palette and my earth palette, and I've added a purple and a green to that. So this is just red and green. I'm painting with acrylic today for a change.
Hooray!
So that's the red and the green with no white in it at all.
What red and what green?
That's the quinacridone red, and the green I have, I think, is a hooker's green. I actually prefer Viridian because it mixes, you can put a lot in before it looks green. It's sort of the opposite of phthalo. Here we have the same mix with a little bit of white. And you can see that value-wise, it's very similar, but it's just a more interesting color, I think. Here we have the same mix again. I'm going to lighten it with a little bit of yellow. So it warms up that flesh tone without, like it's warm, but it doesn't look yellow, right? And that's just one complementary pair, right? We could also change that flesh tone by altering the quantities of the red and the green. So I'm going to go back to my original reds and greens, and I'm going to go a little heavier on the red this time. On the palette, if you can see my palette, you can see that it looks really, really pinky. Same mix, more red, slightly warmer. I'm going to add just a little bit of white so that you can see. Where we're coming from. Same mix, more green. People shy away from green because they think, ooh, nobody's face is green, right? But, sorry, do you have a green face? News to me.
Works for me.
I mean, Gumby is not in our class, so.
Woo!
Do you guys know who Gumby is?
Yes.
Everybody knows who's
Gumby.
I'm never sure, like, what kids these days know. So here we are, a little bit heavier on the green. It's a little bit darker. A little bit grayer. So this is just the same two colors in different quantities, different colors in white. I'm not going to do all the complementary pairs, but I'm just going to show you how you can really change the base tone by adding a different complementary pair. So now I'm going to use yellow and purple. This purple that I have here is not on your list. It's diaphane purple. It is also not my favorite purple. The two purples that I use most often when I'm mixing flesh tones are ultramarine violet, which is of course related to your ultramarine blue, and cobalt violet are my two favorite purples for flesh tones, but I didn't have those.
Why don't you like this one?
This one is sort of like a phthalo purple, where it's a very aggressive purple. Those other two, similar to the Viridian, you can put a large quantity in before it looks purple, right? Okay, so this is purple and yellow. So you can see it's just, if we think back to our U-Glow exercise where you think about color families, and you mix up the color family, like the biggest color family, and put all of its permutations, and then the next biggest color families, like this might be a totally different color family, right? I think the temptation is to just pick one, mix one flesh tone. What is my flesh tone? Like, I've actually seen people kind of compare it to their arm or something. Like, what is my flesh tone? Mix up one vat of paint and just add more white or add more umber for the shadows. And I'm trying to show you that you can get more mileage out of different mixes.
Do you want us to compare the paint to our arm or just yes?
Obviously, I want you to compare the paint to what you're seeing, but it has more to do with how it appears in that lighting situation. Just like when we were doing the white on white still life, the white was anything but white, depending on the light and what was going on around it. It's the same thing, it's just your face now. No biggie, just your face. All right, here we have it with more purple in the mix. And I am using a little bit of the yellow ochre in this mix because, as you know, that Hansa yellow light is very greeny, acidic. And here we have it with more yellow in it. So look at all those beautiful flesh tones. Really just playing with the quantities of two different colors, mixing complementary pairs. So that's usually where I start. When I'm mixing a flesh tone, I pick a complementary pair, and they're all a little bit different, and then I adjust from there, right? So I'll say, this is maybe my main complementary pair for the light portion of the face. Maybe this shadow looks a little greener, I'll put a little green in, I'll start with that and then adjust. Okay, questions about color mixing? All right, so now I want to turn your attention to your handout. And some of you can see George over here. Maybe I'll move George to a more prominent position. I just named him George.
So you draw it, paint him, or you?
No, I'm going to paint an invented person. Okay, so what we're really focusing on in this first pass of the self-portrait are the planes of the face. You want to think of your head as a sculptural volume. That's why I'm asking you to paint it without any of the details, right? So therefore, it's important for you to have a strong light so that it throws those sculptural volumes into relief, right? Let's pretend, for the sake of argument, that your light is coming from above, right? You could also have light from the side, but you want to think about which planes are facing the light and which planes are facing away from the light, right? And that's going to help you get your structure right off the bat. And on the handout, I've given you a number of different ways to think about facial planes. This, by the way, is from a book it's a little green book written by a guy whose last name is Bridgman. It's like a classic anatomy textbook. If you really like to geek out with anatomy textbooks, you can borrow my copy. If you flip through the handout, we start with the skull, because everybody has one of these under there somewhere. What's the main difference between your face and a skull? We have skin, obviously. Nose. That's like the main volume that you have that the skull doesn't have, right? But apart from that, all of these shapes, this light shape up here, boom. These dark shapes under here where the eye sockets are, boom. Light shape here, dark shape under the cheekbones, right? We all have these shapes. The one major difference is that you have you have more of a nose than the skull has. And if you flip through the handout, you can see Bridgman is outlining planes in a couple of different views. So we started off with sort of a frontal view. We also have frontal view is where you can see 2 eyes and 2 ears. A 3/4 view is where you can see 2 eyes and 1 ear. So it's 3 out of the 4 features like that. And a profile view is 1 eye, 1 ear. For our purposes, the easiest thing is a frontal view. So my demo is going to be frontal view. But moving forward, if you decide that you want to think about a 3/4 view or a profile, you have those figured out here too, as well. Okay. So going back to our idea about planes, it's really like a big zigzag, right? So you have the top of your head. Again, notice we're talking about heads and not faces. The top of your head faces up. So if we're assuming light from above, it's going to be light. About here, on most people, this coincides with the hairline. Am I in the picture?
Yeah, you're
Okay. Maybe I'll just move Bob over here and we'll use Bob. Is Bob in the picture?
Yeah, hold on slightly.
It's kind of close
That's better.
now. Yes.
Okay, so this obviously is facing up. About here, we turn a corner, but this is still an up-facing plane. It's not like a side of a box that like shoots straight down. This is an up-facing plane. We get to the brow ridge, that's a down-facing plane. So we have up, light, down, dark. Up, light, down, dark. When we get to the lip, up, light, down, dark. Up, light, down, dark. Up, light, down, dark, right? So like, you're really just kind of ziggy-zagging your way down the face, right? So let's talk about where we're gonna find those features, and then we'll get to painting. Thanks, Bob. No, what's his name, Bob? George. Bob's back there. Thanks, Bob. Okay, so the first thing that you want to get right, and I'm just going to sketch this out briefly kind of as a drawing, is the proportion. And you may have had this in your drawing class. If you had it in sort of a cartooning or an anime context, it's probably different, because as we know, cartoons exaggerate proportion. So not everybody has an oval-shaped head, but we're going to start with an oval because we have to start somewhere. I never start painting with an oval like this. I'm just doing this in order to lay out the proportions for you. And then over here, I'll show you how I would actually begin an assignment like this. All right, so we know that the face is symmetrical this way. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line down the middle here. I'm also going to draw a line in the middle this way. Double check my proportion. There we go. What happens on this midline here?
The eyes.
The eyes. Good. So because we're not doing details, and you can double check on Marvin, you can no, sorry, Marvin is the skeleton, starving Marvin. Sorry, George. Sorry, George. You can double check on George, you can double check on your handout, but you can see that the eyes occur in the midway. So for us, the eye socket is going to sort of split this difference here. I did it backwards. There we go. All right, so we divide in half to get the height of the eyes. We divide this in half again. What does that give us?
The bottom of the nose.
The bottom of the nose. You're going to have a shadow under there. And depending on whether or not you have a tilty up nose or a tilty down nose, that shadow may appear slightly differently. Where that landmark goes to is where it plugs back into your face. Right? Okay, now this is where it gets tricky. How do we divide? Where is the mouth in here?
Slightly after the nose.
It's not halfway. We tend to think of it as being halfway, and what that winds up doing is giving you this like very disapproving look. Close, thirds. So we're going to divide this bottom portion into thirds. We're going to start from the bottom first. So the bottom third goes to here, right? It's the whole ball of the chin. And frankly, this is a skeletal landmark. So once you add sort of flesh and skin, it gets a little bit longer than a third. But the whole bottom third is sort of the ball of the chin here. This right here, the line right here, represents the line between the lips, right? So for us, the upper lip is going to be a down-facing plane that catches a shadow. The lower lip is an up-facing plane, which is light, but then casts a shadow underneath. we measure to the line between the lips because obviously there's a huge variety in the width of people's lips. Like some people have very thick lips, others have very thin. So this is the standard here, this third here. Ears, if you're looking directly out at the viewer, your ears plug into your head sort of level with your eyes. And think about the way your glasses behave, right? So ears are a shape, these ears are gonna look really big, but we'll fix them in a minute. And they plug back into your head on the bottom, kind of level with the nose. That's the kind of thing, the relationship between head, face, and ears is the kind of thing that gives you the view, right? So if we have, like if you're looking a little bit down into your mirror, your ears are gonna look in a slightly different place. Let's see, if you're looking down, what are we doing here? The ears might look higher. If you're looking up, these are the eyes, ears might look lower. Okay, so relationship between eyes and ears varies a lot depending on the view. But if you've got your mirror set up sort of dead square in front of your face, they're gonna line up the top of them, not the top of the ear, but again, the top where it plugs in, lines up with where the eyes are, and the bottom plugs in sort of level with the nose. Don't forget about your neck. It kills me when people do this. Right? Crazy giraffe neck, lollipop head. So think about how your neck kind of fits into your jaw, and remember these muscles that plug in sort of behind your ear and swoop around to the front and plug into your clavicle. Some people, like I've drawn an asymmetrical person. Some people, the neck really does, you can sort of see where it joins in with the ear. Other people, depending on the shape of your jaw, you can see a little bit of jaw and have a gap between ear and neck. But you always want to think about that relationship. And then the last sort of proportion thing I want to talk about is your shoulders. So your shoulders are not down here. Can anybody tell me where your shoulders come from? Yeah, so your shoulders on your back, and you can see this on George. Your shoulders on your back plug into your spine, level with your chin on the front. Obviously, if you lift up your chin, your shoulders don't also jump in, but we're talking about this point here, where your chin kind of inserts into your neck. And I know I have on a big turtleneck, but look at where my apron is sort of level with my chin. If you look from the side, this right here, it all lines up.
Is it where our chin inserts into our neck or where our throat inserts into our neck?
It's where your chin inserts into your neck, right here. If you like all of this, may I encourage you to take figure drawing with me next semester?
I am.
Yeah! Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay. All right, so here's our chin. Instead of going neck, shoulder, we go sort of back of the neck, shoulder. It's still level with your chin. All right, now it's starting to look like a human proportion a little bit. The last thing I want to talk about is hair. Think about where your hairline is. For most of us, it coincides with this plane change that we see here on George, right? Not everybody, obviously hairlines move and hairstyles, you know, your hair can appear lower, but for most of us it's going to coincide with that plane change. Think of your hair as like literally like a helmet that just sits on your head. Even if you have very thin hair that is pulled back very tightly, it's going to add some volume, and in some cases like a super significant volume to the top of your head, and that's going to help your ears look less crazy. So think about, I don't know what kind of hairstyle this person has. I'm sort of making it up, but think of it as a volume just like anything else. You'll shade it. It's a volume that kind of for most of us, curls around a little bit. Even again, if you have very thin hair that's pulled back very tightly, you'll have a little bit of a shadow edge right there. Right there. So that's your basic proportion. Again, I wouldn't necessarily advocate beginning your painting like this. Just keep this proportion in the back of your head as you're making your painting to double check, to make sure. We tend to, in other words, our sort of assumption is that the eyes are the most important thing, and we make them way too big. Don't do that. Don't do that. Right? Okay. So keep these proportions kind of in the back of your head. Any questions about proportion? Oh my God. We're going to have to go quickly. Any questions about proportion before we move on to the actual painting, the alla prima portion of our event? Yes?
So the dark part of hair we get, but the lighter portion we don't, or use it
Well-
as a color?
Just wait a second.
Okay.
Yeah, this I'm just trying to show you proportion. Next I'm going to try and zip through some actual painting. All right. So I'm going to use my yellow, purple, what you call it, complementary pair. So you're going to set yourself up, you're going to look in the mirror, and you're going to start with that zigzag of light and dark shapes, okay? And I'm sort of making this up. I'm using a made-up person,
As you do.
as you do. And I'm doing this very alla prima brow. And then underneath we're going to have the shadows. Oh, it got really purple. There you go. Think about the shapes of your actual eye sockets. They can look very much like sort of conservative glasses. Glasses that used to be like the height of dorky when I was a kid and are now making a real comeback. You see how there's like, if we follow the brow ridge down, there's a little bit of a, what is that, a trapezoid here? It's dark, but it's not as dark as your eye socket. Sort of like a middle dark. Likewise, the sides of your nose are dark but not super dark. Your nose is an up-facing plane that casts a shadow. We've also got temples through here. This brush is not my favorite. Looks a little bit like a dog.
That's
See?
terrible.
It's fine. I'm okay with it. You guys remember the Susanna Coffey? Well, no, I never brought the book up, but we talked about Susanna Coffey a couple of classes ago. She has a self-portrait where she stopped at this stage, and it really does look exactly like a dog. All right, so then we've got cheekbones.
Whack.
I'm trying to stay pretty saturated in my colors. I know that I tend to overuse the white. I'm sort of trying to put myself on a diet here. The cheekbones curve around, and there's not a deep shadow, but there is going to be a plane shift through here. And that's one of those things, those differences that really become more pronounced as we age. All right. Upper lip is a dark shape. We tend to think, I think because of lipstick, that the upper and lower lip need to be the same color, but they're not, because they catch the light differently. So upper lip is a dark shape. I'm gonna have to shrink that a little bit. My proportions are getting a little bit off. Lower lip is a light shape. And again, while I'm doing this, just kind of compare to George here. I'm choosing to use a different mix for the lip, just to give them a little more color variety. Lower lip casts a little shadow. Ball of the chin picks up a little light. Got it too yellow. Ah, I'm rushing. Sorry, guys. There we go. And we give the tops of the ears just a little bit of love over here. I hope you're noticing how sloppy I'm being with my color mixing.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think we tend to, there we go. We tend to get kind of caught up in our colors. If I were going to do anything with the eyes, which you don't have to, depending on the lighting situation, you might get just a little bit of an eyelid coming through here. That would be all I would do today. Because remember, we're going to talk a lot about individual features.
I have a question.
Yes,
Why
Medea.
did you paint triangle
Why did I paint what?
Why didn't you paint?
Right on this?
Yeah.
Because it's an all prima assignment, and I don't want you to get too
Happy?
caught up in drawing first.
So we can't draw right on top of
You can, but just like anything, like notice, I just, very easily moved his eyes pretty far apart. And it's because I was approaching it in a very loose manner. So at least for now, like, we tighten up as we work, right? So if you start tight, it doesn't, it's hard to get the vitality and the life force back. And I painted Obama. All right, so we want a pretty deep shadow under the chin, because your chin, of course, is a big shelf that casts a pretty big shadow.
Professor, I hate to interrupt, but how long is this going to continue?
I'm almost done. I know we're a little bit over.
I need to leave the class.
You can go ahead and leave. All I'm going to do is hair.
Are we doing our necks and shoulders, tops of our shoulders when we do this?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, remember, we're recording, so you can catch the end on Blackboard. Ding.
All right. I did half of this guy and then maybe that.
I like to get real pink in the ears. That's personal preference.
Nice. I like when I do the back one.
I think it's an opportunity for light, for a little variety.
See what I'm in the background? I used the purple and pink for it. And I got the pink for the breast too. So I used some marker. Like, what's the marker?
Saying it out loud, you said you're using a marker.
Am I using a marker? What?
Maybe, maybe not.
We'll give beloved former president a nice t-shirt. He's super cash.
Is it baggy? Stop.
And because it's our class, I would encourage you to put something in the background. So you'll notice that we don't have any of those fiddly details that most people get caught up in, and particularly with your drawing a self-portrait, right? Like we had no eyes, we have no nostrils, all we have is sort of color and plain.
How many shades? 4, 3, 2.
How many shapes?
Shades.
Shades?
Yeah.
I think I had
You did the
a
three.
main light, a main dark, and then a middle light and a middle dark. And then I kind of changed the temperature a little bit, but I think it was those 4 main shades. If I had to, nobody's ever asked me that question before. Yeah, if I had to say, oh, I chopped out the top of the head. Sorry, Mr. President.
Oh, you didn't open it. You didn't press the thing.
He's also grayed a little bit since we last saw him. His hair is grayer. Voila.
So that's what we do on the postcard.
Yeah, do it small on the postcard.
Where do we set up the mirror if we're doing, oh, so we use the mirror, we take a photo also? No. we
Just do it
use
from the mirror as much as you can. So if you're doing it in the classroom, you can either get 2 easels,
Mhm.
or I've had people get pins and pin the mirror right next to their little painting.
And the mirror, where are the mirrors?
The mirrors are locked up in the closet, so
Oh.
I can, if you want one, ask me and I'll hide one for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Jake actually put the mirror on the easel.
Uh-huh.
Had the students use the table for their sketching.
That's smart. So the mirror is upright. We also have the full-size standing mirror. So if not, if it's just one, or you could probably do 2 people at that mirror at the same time, just sitting next to each other, like back to back maybe, and put your easels up to the side. So this is your homework
We will do by Wednesday.
from
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah, next Wednesday we'll do part 2 of the demo where we do features. Okay? Thank you. I know that went a little long. Thank you.
Thank you.